Spiel. All right. Hi, everybody. You're listening to a career advice webinar by the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, the professional association for chemists in Australia. I'm Dave Samet, Principal of DCS Technical and Coordinator of the RACI Mentoring Program. This is the third in our Exploring Career Paths series. This webinar aims to explore career opportunities in chemistry education, finance, regulatory and science communications. The basic point is that for many young people at the beginning of their careers or still during their studies, it's not just that they're not sure what job to go for, but they're not even sure what job opportunities are out there. So by talking to different people and exploring different opportunities, we hope to inspire you to find something that really interests you and engages you going forward. So with our panels of professionals, we will be giving you an insight into what careers in these sectors might look like. Drawing from our experience, we'll be discussing the range of opportunities available within these sectors and highlighting some of the key pressures. We welcome you to ask questions via the Q&A tab, the Q&A function. Now, before we start tonight's panel session, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting all around Australia. We recognise the elders past, present and emerging, and we recognise their contributions as Australia's first scientists and engineers, building a healthy and safe community, what they've done and what we can still learn from their ways. We'd also like to thank the sponsors of the RACI Careers Development Program, DCS Technical, Envirolab and Laboratory Credit Union. So thank you to all of our panelists this evening. We have Marie Stewart, Principal Consultant at MAS Management Systems, Dr. Robert Waugh, Head of Wealth and Retirement Products and Markets at NAB. Have we yet been joined? Yes, excellent. Dr. Kelly Reynolds-Massey-Reid, high school chemistry and science teacher at Merredin High School. And Dr. Rob Morrison, OAM, Professorial Fellow at the College of Education, Psychology and Work at Flinders University. Social work, I should say, not just work. But perhaps most famous for his leading role in over 500 episodes of the Curiosity Show, which ran from 1972 to 1990 and was an inspiration, not only to a generation of children, but also for the American Mythbusters program. If I sound like a fanboy at this point, that's completely fair. Rob Morrison and Dean Hutton were personal heroes of mine, and I'm very delighted to see that also for Marie. So,
yes, very kind.
Callie, you timed your entrance perfectly. So why don't we start with you, Callie?
No, I haven't got a picture of Kelly.
Say that again, Rob?
I haven't got a picture of Kelly.
Oh, okay. Well, she's here, so we can see her.
Okay.
Callie, can you give us a 2-minute introduction about yourself and your role?
Sure. I grew up in the country. I moved around a little bit from primary school to high school. I finished high school in Coffs Harbour and moved to the Big Smoke to study chemistry, which was very exciting. My goal at that time was to try and combine chemistry and marine biology and see where that took me. And then during the process, I kind of stuck with chemistry and got right into that area as well. So during my 3 years, I led up to an honours degree and did some organic synthesis, which is very exciting, a really interesting area of chemistry that I liked. I'm looking at different molecules that could reduce cocaine addiction in the brain and how their structures were related to the cocaine structure and the receptor structure, which is quite fun. The structure of the molecules and the synthesis of the molecules. From there, research kind of took a little bit of hold of me, and I went into my PhD. I decided that perhaps I wanted to branch out more from organic synthesis, and I delved into the world of biosensors. So that was, again, a bit of a change, but I was able to combine my organic synthesis and learn some new skills and look at some really atomically smooth carbon surfaces for patterning biosensors on and making some stable attachments, which is really interesting. But during that time, from the start of honours, I started to do some more work in the teaching labs. So part of my honours, I got to demonstrate to some first year chemistry students in the lab, which is very fun, smaller groups. So I had like a group of 8 or 10 first years, teaching them chemistry, teaching them skills. From there, it branched out to me doing some more senior labs. So I went into some more second year analytical labs. I was able to take part in the third year research component lab, which was really interesting. You'd get divided up into little small groups and sent out into research projects, which was quite fun. And just being able to supervise that in itself and being able to help the students devise methods and train them in these techniques was all starting to become a little bit more appealing to me than perhaps going into research. I still love my research and I still find research very interesting, but the thought of perhaps research and lecturing to 500 people as opposed to a smaller class where you get that one-on-one was starting to be a little bit less appealing, and the smaller class sizes were far more interesting for me. So during my PhD, I started demonstrating more to the senior labs. I took on some foundation studies as well to students that were coming into Australia from non-English speaking countries, which was another experience all in itself, but very fun. So that was even more of a teaching role from there. And then it just kind of took off. So I finished my PhD and then went, I like research, but I've really started to become interested and enjoying teaching these smaller groups. So I decided to do a diploma of education, which you can't do anymore. You do your master's instead. But it still took me 2 years. And in between that time, I was doing a bit of research, demonstrating and teaching at the university. I was doing running some first year tutorials as well. And got my teaching degree. So from there, I moved into an all-boys school, which was a bit of a shock, but a very fun experience in itself. So I spent 8 years there teaching boys, and now I've moved into a girls' school, and it's just been a really great experience for me being able to take people through just learning about the basics of science and being able to see them start to put together all the little bits and pieces of how the world works. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So now I'm moved into teaching girls, which is a new experience in itself. And it's very rewarding and very exciting, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
Rob, Rob Morrison, I'm going to call you Rob and Robert, otherwise we're going to get confused. Rob, sticking with you, because you started as an academic, but you've also, obviously have that extensive science communications background.
Yes, it's more common now than it was. In my day, that's an old person saying, isn't it, in my day, but back in the 70s, 60s, universities tended to discourage scientists from dealing with the media. I think the words were, it'll be professional death. My university was much more accepting and in fact quite encouraging. So I had a head start there. These days, of course, scientists are told if you don't deal with the media, it's professional death. But I was a bit like Kelly. I started one direction, but it didn't really fit. And I was doing a bit of work with the ABC with education. It was done in Adelaide in those days, and almost fell into the Curiosity Show by accident. But it proved a sort of godsend to me because, I mean, we can keep talking about what happened to us, but anybody watching is probably wondering what's going to happen to them. And I think some 78-year-old bloke saying this is what I did is not very helpful. But there are some things I got out of it. One is it's really important to try enough things to know what you are and who you are. I I didn't until it was quite late. I thought research. I think I just wanted to be called doctor, you know, that was my motivation. But I wasn't really very good at it, mainly because I was too interested in other things. I didn't realize then that the personality you need to be a top researcher is really quite driven and one track. That's where really good researchers come from. I'm a dabbler, and I beat myself up a lot in my research, thinking, why can't I concentrate? Why can't I get on with it? Why don't? In fact, I realize now, temperamentally, I'm not best suited to research. I'm best suited to lots of other things. Little bits of lots of things is me. But it took me till my PhD to realize that. So what I'm trying to say in my bumbling way, I suppose, is I say this to kids in school. I'm sick of going along to these speech nights where some well-meaning person will get up and say to these unfortunate students, you can be anything you want to be. I think it's the cruelest thing in the world. You can't. I'll never be a top sprinter. I'll never be a top musician. I like playing it, but I'll never be top. I can't be that. But what I can do is to, failure is the wrong word, but you need to test yourself at lots of things to see what fits. And some of them won't. I was offered the job as weatherman on the ABC because I'd done a lot of broadcasting. I thought, oh, there's a good job. I absolutely hated it. Standing there waiting for my cue to do this peculiar weatherman's dance. Didn't suit me at all. But I didn't know that till I tried. So you really do have to, unless you know what you are wanting to be, you really have that clear, and you're lucky. Most of us don't. I didn't. You've got to test yourself in lots of things, and you may end up doing something you never thought you were going to do simply because you find it fits. And I was lucky. Broadcasting and teaching fitted me better than research, and I shouldn't have been beating myself up for not being good at research. I should have been getting on with what fitted.
Thank you for your insight. I think that's well done. Marie.
I'm also a dabbler, if you like, in a way. So what my career path looks like is a little different as the others. So I had always had an interest in science. If I wasn't going to be a doctor, I was going to be a scientist. Good thing was I didn't get into medicine. Very happy about that now. So I started doing a science degree. I had always loved chemistry. So I, of course, was going to do some chemistry in my university days. I thought I'd do a lot more biology. Didn't enjoy biology in first year. Stuck with the chemistry and ended up doing a double major in chemistry. So I ended up with your garden variety science degree from a very fine institution in Newcastle that gives some great practical training. At the same time as studying, I also worked as a laboratory person in a pathology lab. Interest in medicine fitted with that idea. I loved working in a lab, but I also discovered that it can be a bit mundane after a while. I need variety. And so that was all well and good. And from a personal point of view, I needed to move from Newcastle to Sydney. So I started looking for a job and landed a job with the National Laboratory Accreditation Body, NATA. And in that, my world of science opened up again because I was presented with a whole range of testing laboratories, not just chemistry laboratories, microbiology laboratories, mechanical testing laboratories, and so on. But I moved into more of an administrative role, which I found that I really enjoyed. I think I've got a bit of, maybe OCD, something like that, because I'm an auditor. And so I like to look at the fine detail, as well as also considering the big picture. But I do like the part of the work which involves looking at the science and making some evaluation about how good it is in collaboration with some other technical experts. So that was the other piece of work that I discovered I liked. I liked working with other people who from whom I can learn from a technical point of view, but who together we can collaborate and work out what we're presented with and what that means. Along the way, I did an MBA because I moved into management. That was also a really good thing. That taught me a whole range of, you know, the other side of my brain that I didn't get to explore in a chemistry degree. But it also was a fabulous professional development and personal development tool, because master's level study, I think any high degree research or form of study helps you to understand who you are as a person, because you get that you have to think about a lot of things. So that was a fabulous thing for me. And in that, I discovered that, hey, I might maybe like to start a business. Again, through personal circumstances, off I go and start my own consultancy business. And I've been doing that for 17 years. And in that consultancy business, I'm able to combine my interest in management systems, which is, if you like, part of a regulatory type of work. Many of the regulatory systems we work under have a management systems component to it. So that's been really fabulous to dabble in the world of quality, which is the area I particularly dabble in, as well as offering some analytical science consultancy advice. But didn't end there. Along the way, this is why I'm a dabbler, I decided that I might like to really explore the other side of my brain. How about I do an arts law degree? So not one for the faint-hearted. 11 years later, I end up with a lovely practicing certificate, and now I can act as a solicitor. But the bit that I like about doing in my work as a solicitor is I get to also work with people who do science. And not everybody in the world understands what it's like to work in science, and particularly in a laboratory. So that's something that's a special skill that only people really who have perhaps done a science degree can take away. But it stands you in good stead for interacting with other professionals in different industries. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Robert.
So I think you may have 3 dabblers on the panel, which hopefully I'll be the third. So fourth, yeah, the fourth. As you can tell probably from my accent, I'm English. So I was born in the UK and grew up there and went to university and studied physics, not chemistry. I apologise for that. And I knew, you know, from a very early age that I kind of loved science and mathematics. So that was always going to be the course for me. And then when I finished my physics degree, I really felt as if I wasn't kind of finished with the research. And so I went in and did a master's and worked on some of the vertex detectors for the Atlas experiment, which is where the Higgs boson search got completed. And then did quite well and enjoyed that, and then went on and did a PhD in experimental particle physics, specifically quantum chromodynamics, which is the interactions of leptons and quarks as they collide together at close to the speed of light. And I loved it. I went abroad, worked on the experiment, ran this machine, had my shift work, did my analysis, and it was fantastic. And kind of helped with this kind of distributed and analytics and data analysis. At the time, the data out of these experiments was equivalent to kind of like a third of the world's telephony data. So it was a huge big data problem and very interesting. And I finished my PhD and passed, which was great. And I didn't quite know what to do. And they offered me a postdoctoral fellowship for a while, which I did, but I don't think I made it 12 months, because I kind of came to the conclusion. I said, I absolutely love physics, and I love particle physics, and I love science. And I think if I get on the publication treadmill, I might end up not enjoying it. And it comes back to the fact that I think I may be a little bit of a dabbler, and I like doing a bit of that and then going and do something else. And I'd always been utterly fascinated with the nature of money and financial markets and how that works. And so I just quit my job and then went down to London. I was at Glasgow for my PhD. I went down to London and slept on a friend's bedroom floor, and just went and interviewed with all of the banks, and I got a job on a trading floor within about 6 weeks. So I've been in investment banking and on the trading floor for the past 20 years. And And it was fascinating because firstly, it was very like a research department, certainly particle physics. There was huge rooms with big computers on and lots of very fast computers doing fast computations and working out whether to buy and sell. And so I kind of fitted in reasonably easily to the kind of the work. And other than the noise was so chaotic, it was very difficult for me to work. I used to have to do it in the evenings. And after a while, you know, they gave me this stack of books about how financial markets works and bonds and options, all that kind of stuff. And if you've done heat diffusion equations, which I'm sure most of you in the audience have probably done, man, it's easy. Don't let anybody in the financial markets tell you that any of this is very complicated. It's totally not. It's certainly not quantum mechanics. And so, you know, within 3 months, I was up the curve, and I've been loving it. And I meandered, you know, between the trading floor and onto the private side. We're doing kind of mergers and acquisitions and a bunch of other stuff. And we left, and I went to Hong Kong and Singapore, and then I ended up running part of NAB's balance sheet here in Australia, kind of managing about, you know, 35 to 40 billion dollars worth of assets, which was incredibly interesting. And then probably, you know, another 5 or 6 years ago, I thought, oh, you know, I like to dabble in something else as well. So I went off and, you know, did a couple of startups as well, same as Marie. And so I sit on the board of 3 startups and in various industries. And I still work on a trading floor, actually. And so I still find it interesting in developing products and stuff like that. But I'm a dabbler. I like to have my fingers in many different pies. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it, Dave.
Now, Robert, it's probably worth making the note that you are far from unique being a scientist in the finance field, that the scientific skills, and particularly the mathematical skills, are reasonably well sought after in this field.
Yeah, if you threw a stone from my desk on the trading floor, you'd probably hit 2 PhD mathematicians and 1 physicist PhD. They are so common, and it's very simple. You know, highly numerate, analytical, problem solvers, but kind of like not kind of dirty problem solvers who kind of know which corners to cut, and to get kind of things working, and also they kind of work in teams, and obviously, you know, develop software, whether you know, C or C++ or Python, whatever you can learn. Absolutely, the skill, almost any STEM graduate would have the skills required to kind of work on a trading floor. The problem, obviously, is that you have no idea what the hell we're talking about when we talk about the financial products and how the markets trade. But honestly, it's not very difficult to learn it. You can, you know, it's a pretty steep curve, and but it's very easy to get over that quite quickly.
And before we leave you, I also want to add that, of course, you and I first came into contact with each other because you were looking to see how you could encourage more women in STEM into your field. So if any of the women who are listening to this broadcast are interested, we would be happy to put you in contact with Robert. So.
Yeah, that's right. We realized we needed to be much more purposeful about going out and hiring the best talent, and being kind of understanding the diversity much more about going out and doing that things, because you know, through the nature of selection of different courses and different STEM courses, I don't think Australia is any different from the UK on that. You do have a majority of men in these courses, and that's obviously not the only pool that we want to pull from. So we've been much more purposeful about actually going out and firstly trying to find them, secondly trying to help them curate their career such they're kind of ready to come into the trading floor. So yeah, so anybody, please reach out to me.
Absolutely. Now, what I love is that each of you have basically anticipated the first 2 or 3 questions that were on my list, and most of you haven't actually seen the questions for tonight. So I love that we're all thinking on the same lines. I might adapt my question. Last week's Ask Me Anything webinar with Dr. Philip Abraham, who is Senior Vice President for Veolia, employing 180,000 people worldwide. He spoke about the difference between luck and opportunity. Between you know, blind luck and taking the opportunities as they come past. Rob, would you like to speak on that topic? You know, how has luck / opportunity / plan been balanced in your career?
Yes, gee, it's a pretty hard one to answer briskly, but and you can't always sort the two out. But it partly goes, we've used the term dabbling, excuse me, we've used the term that we are sort of dabblers. That's probably not quite fair on ourselves. It's not a good term. Dabbling suggests being pretty superficial. I think what all of us are probably trying to get to, or what I was anyway, is to develop several strings to your bow. Develop your interests, follow your interests, even explore to see if you have an interest in something. Dean, my partner Dean and I in Curiosity Show did a TEDx talk once, and on the program we had a woman, I wish I could remember her name, but I can certainly remember her talk. And her talk was that people shouldn't think of having one job, they should think of having two jobs. And it's not a bad idea if you can do it, because she was a public servant by day and she was a musician at night. Now, had she decided to follow her primary interest of music, I think she would have had a wretched existence, because trying to be a professional muso when you're dealing with gig jobs is hand-to-mouth stuff. Actors know it well. Whereas she had a job she quite liked in the public service, but it wasn't where her real interest lay. That lay with the music. But she could do what she wanted in the music, because she had the money and the safety of her real job to let her go off and do what she wanted. There was quite a lesson in there. So I've got a feedback. Oh, that's better. So that's partly linked to your story of, where does luck and opportunity come? I think if you're following leads and exploring where they may take you, often things open up that you wouldn't have found otherwise. It did for me, but I think it's not useful to talk about ourselves, what happened to us, unless we can directly relate it to the people watching who are thinking, gee, what do I do? I had some very good advice when I was doing a PhD. I didn't understand it at the time, but it was an old and wise academic who said, make yourself an expert in something. It doesn't much matter what. Now, I didn't understand that at the time. I do now. The very process of picking on something and becoming expert in it brings all sorts of skills in that are really transferable to something else. So I think that's an important one to pass on. The other is just to explore, and suddenly things open up that you would never have found if you didn't explore. And that's the luck of it, but the opportunity you create by putting out these feelers and exploring things and developing interest and having curiosity and following these things where they may go.
Excellent. Callie, would you like to add to that? So coming back, the original question was, luck versus opportunity versus planning in your career.
Yeah. I didn't plan to become a teacher. That wasn't my idea. But definitely following on from Rob, follow your interests. If you are, so I know it's not quite chemistry related, but I have decided to take up silversmithing in my spare time. It's not related to chemistry, but it is very, very interesting, and it has opened up a wider range of opportunities for me to talk to people, to learn new things, and then by talking to and being involved in the community that you're learning in as well will also open up a wider range of opportunities for you to maybe delve into or pick up your interest in as well.
Volunteering is very important too.
Very much so. It takes a big place. So doing something that might be a little bit out of your field but still quite involved, I just give it a crack. Like, if it interests you, have a go at it and see where it takes you, basically. Yeah.
I completely agree. Everything that's being said. Marie, would you like to add?
I agree with give it a crack. That's pretty much how.
Did I freeze or did
Seems like my career's been just, I wonder what if I tried that. Oh. Yes, it works or it doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. The volunteering, don't, I have to say this, I'm an RACI board member, but I'd like you to volunteer in RACI if you have the time. It is a fantastic opportunity of providing good leads into wherever you want to go. And it allows you to explore some things without being constrained to being an employee, if I can put it that way. So you can volunteer for something that is totally different to what you might do in your day job. And that opens up a whole new skill set and a whole new sense of who's around and who might be looking for skills that you can offer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you can volunteer for pleasure, you know, I don't know, the local blind society or something, or you can volunteer strategically. I mean, for instance, if you're volunteering at the RACI, you're building a personal brand and exposing your name to 4,500 people who work in your field. You know, there's a lot of upside to having your name out there. Now, I'm just actually going to do a quick scroll through the names here. No, I don't see her here, but often Sami is here, and she has built an enormous personal brand through her involvement in the Victorian ECCG. Just as example, you know, there's a lot of members who know Sami just through that bit of volunteering. So, but to move on, Rob, in your own career, luck versus opportunity versus planning.
I think and for the life of me, I can't quite remember the Chinese character. There is a Chinese character for luck and opportunity, which is, I think, risk when it's combined. So I think I said earlier that, you know, when I finished my PhD, I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to go and give this trading floor a crack, and that wasn't an accident. I'd had an interest in that already, and in fact, you know, and I'm sure we're all good friends here, so I'll tell you the story. And so I actually opened up a brokerage account in my father's name when I was 13 years old, because I used to go to the library on Saturday in town. And when I got to the library, I used to be a vivacious reader. And I found this newspaper that's pink. And I was reading this kind of pink newspaper. And I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but the Financial Times was pink at that point. And I was looking at all these stock prices on in the Financial Times, and I was kind of like, oh geez, these prices vary and you can kind of make money. And so I took my paper round money, and then I filled out the forms for my dad and opened up a brokerage account with him, and then I started trading penny stocks. And I did so well that the brokerage firm phoned up my father and said, oh, you know, Mr. Waugh, congratulations, you've had a great year, would you like to come in for a glass of champagne? And he was like, what are you talking about? and then I was found out, and my mum and dad took the money off me and gave it back to me when I went to university. And so you I think everybody's right. You just have to follow your nose. If your nose is sniffing something out, just follow it. And you don't know what's gonna happen or how it's gonna turn out. And for me, it turned out that, you know, I've had a 20-year career on the trading floor, and enjoyed it. And so yeah, does that answer?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, for myself, I only once in my entire career made a planned move, and it didn't work out, and I lasted 6 months. So you just, you know, best laid plans and all. All right. So
can I just before you leave that topic, I'll try and be brief, but I want to pick up on something that Robert said, because it's really important. We hear a lot about STEM, and, you know, we need to get more women into STEM and or girls into STEM, etc. I'm a bit unhappy with the term STEM, because you need to unpack it a bit. In my field of biological, particularly medical science, it's full of young women, you know, bright young women. There's no shortage of them there. It's engineering, not so much. So I think the science, technology stuff becomes a catch-all, but it actually isn't when you actually dissect it. And in my experience, the research direction, unless they're really suited to it and they have a family life that suits it, is particularly tough on young women. I've seen a lot of them. They go in, they're really bright. They do all their you know, come top of their undergraduate stuff. They get into a PhD, then they get married and they have kids. And then for them, there's a double hurdle of getting back, because a year or so out of the game, it's very hard to catch up. But a lot of those have been the young women who actually then say, well, look, research isn't for me. I can't do it. It's just too unmanageable with my life. And they're the ones who become really good at something else. Now, that's not just to be discouraging if research is your thing. But for young women, there are hurdles that we shouldn't have, but we do have when they do their PhD and then take a bit of time out. It's very hard for them. And I think, to explore for them some of the ways you can put that PhD or the master's or whatever it is to good use is really a very important step.
Have you any suggestions on what could be done structurally to make it easier to remove those hurdles?
Well, there are some things.
Yeah, sorry, maybe Rob, I could kind of add, because we have exactly the same problem on the trading floor. When they the first child is usually fine, and then they come back, and then by the time it's the second one, we have a huge drop-off rate. And so we've actually been really purposeful, and so there are strategies that you can do. The first thing is that during maternity leave, you can actually organise kind of structured visits back into the office so that they can kind of maintain, in a sense, like keep their hand in the game. It's like, I suppose it's like playing. I know Rob's a musician. I suppose it's like playing live, right? You've still got to get up onto the stage and kind of do it. So we structure. We have a very structured way of them coming in the office while they're on maternity leave, obviously, not impacting on their daily lives, and then actually very structured return, kind of coming in regularly up until the point where they actually come back in, and then usually have like massively flexible working hours as well, which is actually at the moment it's really easy because everybody's kind of gone back. Everybody's kind of hybrid working from home, and everybody kind of gets the point. Like the argument's done, right? Because you're at home doesn't mean you're skiving off. Everybody knows that you're still working, and so there are very purposeful things that you can do, and I'm sure it's the same in research areas as well.
Yeah, it's good to look for employers who treat you like that. That's important, particularly for these young women who have a very rough time of it sometimes.
Since we're talking about structural barriers to progressing for women in STEM, I think it's really important we start to hear from the women here. Marie, Kelly, who would like to jump in?
Kelly seems to be pointing at me. I don't know, Kelly.
No, you can go first. Sorry.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, in terms of that whole maternity leave thing, so we were a bit novel with our first one in that I stayed home for the first 3 months and then chived off to work full time and travel and all those things that I did. And my husband was the primary carer for the next 6 months. And then after that, off he went to daycare and that sort of thing. With the second one though, I wanted to be a mum. I wanted to be at home a bit longer. I didn't like it that I only had 3 months at home with my baby. You cannot have it all, I don't think, at any one time necessarily. So I decided to be a little kinder to myself and have 6 months maternity leave. And that was lovely. I got to spend time with my second child in a different way to how I had with my first. It meant that she didn't have to start daycare quite in the same way that my son did. It also importantly allowed me time to build a business because I could effectively do a lot of work from home while I had a young child. So that was a risky exercise. I'm not one to take on a lot of risk, but it was how I could conceive of having a life for me and my family. And I've been able to continue that by being my own boss, but that's not for everyone. It's not a thing that everybody can necessarily have the discipline to work for themselves. Some people really do need direction. Some people, even in spite of the working from home things that people like to do at the moment, actually like being in an office and they like that structure. So it's a very individual thing. And I guess for me, the way that I dealt with the barrier was I created my own opportunity. but that's not something that everybody could do. I feel very grateful that I was able to do it. But yeah, it has to be a well considered path, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Do you want to?
Kelly?
It's when I left research. So in my degree, we had almost 50% women in my chemistry course. The labs were almost 50%, but then when you do get into the academia, it just does drop off. But I have recently gone back, and I have noticed that there are a lot more younger women moving up at university and at research and university. So I think the culture itself is now starting to change. But it is, I think, particularly if you're working with chemicals and all those sort of things, it also adds an extra layer of difficulty. Well, it did in my mind to having kids and what that would look like as a research chemist. It's definitely doable, though. You do have to structure it well. There are a few times that you will have to sacrifice a few things, perhaps start a little bit later to try and develop your career a little bit more, to have those papers out there, to then have the ability to maybe publish a few more while you're on maternity leave, which isn't going to be an easy thing. I'm pretty certain I don't have children of my own, but I'm pretty certain managing a baby, managing 2 babies and writing papers isn't going to be the world's easiest task. But that being said, I think the other half of most people's relationships are now starting to help out more, and it's starting to become a better balance, just both at work and at home. So if you can find someone who's willing to help you and support you in your research career and your family, that does have a really big part to play in it. I know it's not easy to necessarily find, but yeah, as Marie said, there will be choices you will have to make at points, but don't let it put you off. If you're out there and you're a woman and you want to do some research, please stick with it. I know teaching girls, they're all so keen, so it'd be lovely to see them working all the way up through.
And there are now grants coming in for people in that position.
Yes.
Universities are getting better at it, but
yes,
you need to explore that before.
Definitely.
Look, I'm going to add my 2 cents worth here too. I'm going to speak to the men in the audience and say it's great that we are inching towards equality in the workplace, but we're never going to actually achieve it without your active participation. And it's really important that every man out there is an active agent for change. Just remember, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate, gentlemen. So now we are burning through our time. This is such an interesting discussion. I think we should take a couple of the questions from the audience. Rob, how did you go about finding those different things to test about what fit and what didn't?
Yeah, I'm harking back a bit. I suppose, I was always interested in playing music, so I picked up a trumpet and I taught myself that. I'm a silversmith too. I do that in my spare time. I was fortunate. I grew up without television. So my boyhood was one of training for go out and amuse yourself. That's hugely important. I mean, kids, we used to worry about kids being square-eyed because they watch television. Now I worry about them being two-thumbed because that's what they do. All the time you're doing that, you're not exploring all these things that you might be able to do. I always loved animals. I kept animals. I ended up being responsible for 2 zoos. It was volunteering that got me into that. But you just explore these things and find out what clicks. So I suppose that was it. And just going, I suppose some of that got me into the early television. It was rearing a baby possum that got me. I'll tell you the story very briefly. I was rearing a baby possum. A friend of mine was producing Here's Humphrey. Said, will you come in and show this possum? So I've been working with the ABC where you come in and you have a talk through and a cup of tea and then rehearsal and a cup of tea and break for lunch and cup of tea and set the lights and all that, go home after doing a segment. So I took this little possum in and she sat me down and I got the possum out to do my first talk through. And we did that and she got up and went away and I sat there waiting for the second rehearsal, whatever it was. She came out and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm waiting to do the segment." She said, "We've done it, go." I slunk off. I got a phone call the next day saying, did I want to be part of this new program? They thought I was extremely relaxed on camera. At least I had the wit not to tell them that I didn't know I was being filmed. I thought it was a rehearsal. So that's how I got into what was going to become Curiosity Show. So that's what I mean. Rearing baby animals was a thing I did. I had no idea of television, but it led to television. So, I used to have to make enamel jewelry to get my money to get through the PhD. That became silversmithing, and it's a sort of part-time job now. So
that's outstanding.
You just do things, and they lead somewhere.
Can I just say to everybody, I had the very great pleasure of appearing on screen with Rob and Dean when we recorded the RACI 100 experiments for RACI 100 Centenary a couple of years ago. I will put a link to those videos. Contrary to Rob's relaxed app, I was so excited to be on screen with my heroes that I fluffed my lines, I forgot my lines, I missed the takes, I made it all bad, but gee, I had fun. So thank you very much, Rob. Now, a question for you from Jeff Marie. The chemical regulatory specialist world is a big missing area in being taught, as we don't have adequately experienced persons in our universities and TAFEs with industry knowledge. All of the old chemical regulatory specialists are getting older in our authorities and business, and there are very few young scientists. That seems like a backhanded insult there, coming to replace them. A very interesting area to work with lots of relevance to sustainable future. How do we fix this area?
That is an excellent question, and one that in my other professional society, the Australian Organisation for Quality, that we are actually pondering at the moment. So in one of my other worlds of quality, there really aren't any, you don't go off and do a quality management degree or anything like that. Many people fall into quality, and I think it's the same thing that happens with chemical regulatory science. You fall into it rather than it being a career path. What really needs to happen though is, because I think the way university courses work is there has to be a demand. So, perhaps talking to, for example, governments about the qualifications of people that are doing that work. Sure, you can have your technical chemistry knowledge, but there's a range of other bits of knowledge that you need to do that work. And perhaps there'd be some good policy settings that governments could consider to encourage people to attain those qualifications, which then creates the demand in universities and so on. It's going to be a slow burn, though, I think. In Australia, we're not, as I said, we're not very good at picking up on that. For example, in New Zealand, in quality, they have a fellow who's a professor in quality. So, they're a little more advanced in a couple of their universities than we are in any of ours. And I think that might be part of the solution, is trying to professionalise some of those other attributes of skills that are required.
Very interesting. Jeff has provided his contact details, Marie. I will forward them to you at the end of this. Okay, for everybody, how much has the hustle lifestyle impacted your career trajectory? Robert, I want to start you. Haven't spoken for a while.
And I think by hustle, essentially they're referring to the dabbling. Although I think Rob was right, we need to find another word for it, deepening or something. I think the hustle side of it has actually benefited, because it gives you so many different contexts and so many different perspectives on how problems are solved, or how businesses are built, or how people view things, or how you can sell things to people, or how you can market yourself and market others. I think like the hustle is only makes you a more textured human and a more textured kind of professional. And so I think, you know, when you kind of add the strings to the bow kind of argument, hustling is one of the strings to the bow. And I think it's that, you know, when there is the opportunity, when you have taken the risk and there is the opportunity, actually selling yourself to say, oh, you know, I'm the right person to do this, or I'm the right person for you to partner with, or whatever it is, I'm the right person for you to give me some money to go and do a startup with. I think the hustle is an incredibly important factor.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Callie, would you like to add to it?
I wouldn't say I've been like a hustling lifestyle, but yeah, just it hasn't impacted it too much per se. It's definitely a change, and it was something unexpected, but no, it's been fun. I would go with fun rather than impacting it.
If I can twist the question a little bit, I would say that, you know, given that I'm nearly 50 years old and I guess I'm starting to hobnob with people who are more senior in their careers, most of the senior people have been workaholics. And if I take hustle with that workaholic framework, interpretation, is there a problem? Because I know people who are successful and workaholic. I know people who are laid back and happy but not necessarily successful. Is there a way to have both, to have a work-life balance and a great career?
I think it really depends on what you classify as successful. For me, I'm like, I'm not out there making stacks of cash as a teacher, but I do feel that my job is quite satisfying in itself. I'm comfortable. I'm doing the things that I want to do. I'm able to explore my own interests, but I'm also doing something that is quite satisfying in itself. So for me, being able to see a class progress and learn, for me, I classify that, okay, maybe not successful, that sounds like a massive ego thing, but I feel like I'm progressing and I'm doing something substantial. So it may be busy during term time, really, really busy, but I feel doing something that I enjoy and doing something that is meaningful to me is successful in its own. Yeah. People may disagree with that, but
I certainly don't want to sound like I'm judging anyone's careers, because that's certainly not what I'm saying. But you're also young, Callie. You know, if we ask you the same question 20 years from now,
it might be different.
I think Callie, you've hit on something though, that success is a relative concept, and what means success to me is something that will be totally different to, for example, Dave. So you remember I said about the MBA and how it really helps you to personally develop yourself? That's one of the things that I discovered is what makes me feel happy and successful. And the interesting thing that happened to me shortly after finishing my MBA was when I did start a consulting career in that regulatory sort of space. Because in that I discovered that I had an interest in business and how business ran, which is not something you get from a science degree at all. That opportunity to build something for myself, whilst I have not been wildly successful, I do not live in, Vaucluse or anything like that. I live in suburban Sydney in the Sutherland Shire. But I'm happy and I feel successful because I've been able to help other people.
But I would describe you as successful, Marie. You know, you are well known in your field. You are a board member of RACI. You know, you are somebody who has developed substance in their career. You know, I mean, I will freely say I set out at the end of my honours degree that my plan was to become a captain of industry. I completely failed on that goal and don't regret it for 1 second.
It's a hugely important point, actually, that business of you don't want to compare yourself to others too much, because you beat yourself up. and it's the wrong thing to do. I mean, I beat myself up because I thought I was a crap researcher compared with my colleagues. I should have been doing something else, is really what I should have discovered. But also, times change. I mean, when we're doing Curiosity Show, I thought, well, or television, I thought, well, television's ephemeral. I'll write books. I've written 45 books. Now books are ephemeral, and we've got Curiosity Show on YouTube. That's going to last forever. I mean, the whole thing's completely turned around. So things can be wildly important at the time, and then in 10 years' time, they're obsolete. I still remember the old, when Word came in on computers, and all these blokes who were expert printers with all their lead type, etc. Suddenly junk shops were full of these little cabinets where you used to keep the lead type. The lead type was all melted down, and that job didn't exist anymore. So if you've been a really top printer, what did you do? And too many blokes, I was one of them, didn't spend enough time with their family while they were doing their careers. And that, I regret that now. I mean, I could have spent more time with my sons. I wish I had. I was doing 2 jobs, but I should have been doing more family, because that lasts, and you don't want to let that one go.
Robert, we haven't heard from you. If you want to jump in, we are getting over time. We've still got questions, so we can keep going, or you can add.
I agree about kind of family time. I was very lucky, actually. I was the kind of generation where I came into banking, and that old kind of, macho, kind of hard drinking, mostly male environment was kind of a dying breed. So, I took 3 months paternity leave with both my kids, and worked flexibly for a while I was coming back. And so I think you can have the right balance now, which is really lucky, because certainly if you're of a certain generation, I'm not yet 50, so I'm same age as you, Dave, is that you want to spend time with your family, and you want to be able to balance. And there is no judgment. In most kind of, I suppose, financial services or kind of industries, I don't think there is judgment now about you not doing 80 hours weeks. To be honest, I still have some long weeks, and but it's much more manageable. And if I need to spend time with the family, it's perfectly acceptable to make that choice, and you're not judged, and it doesn't really impact your career. Not from what I've noticed, anyway.
So the next question, Tiffany has asked, hi all, I'm wondering if retraining is the best option to move into a different career type. Robert was able to get a job on the trading floor and then learn on the job. Are there any other fields where this is possible? Is there any financial or other support available to undertake more study? Now, while you guys think, I'll just quickly say this. I've said it many times before. Retraining or study is a long, slow, expensive way to find your way into a different job. There are so much easier ways than going back and doing further study. You do study if you love it and want to do it. You don't do it to get a job. Marie.
Precisely. That's what I'm going to say. And if you are like me and the perpetual student having 4 degrees, well, I'll stop now. There are government programs that, just like you have a HECS, you end up with a HECS debt, unfortunately, but there is postgraduate programs in fee help as well. So it doesn't just end at HECS. But I totally agree with Dave. It's taken me perhaps a long time to understand that one does not need to do further study in order to move into some other job. In my case, though, in law, I didn't have a choice. One needs a law degree to be a lawyer, but in many other professions, you don't need a degree. You don't need to do further study up front. Like I said, in quality, people fall into quality.
We shouldn't, though, just assume study means degrees, which was a bit that. I mean, one of my relatives left school he didn't finish year 11. I wondered what on earth he was going to do. And he rang me when I was at work once and said, Dad, there's one thing I would like to do, but, it's very expensive. And it was one of these Microsoft courses. And I thought, well, here goes all my money. Do it, son. It was the best thing ever. He got jobs straight out of it. So I think there's study of shorter particularly vocational courses put on by employers, because they are getting graduates who don't have the skills that they actually need in the job. So some of these are very focused, short-term things that I gather, and you can comment, but certainly in my experience, were absolutely crucial in getting a good job out of it. So I would like to hear perhaps the people on that side of it say a bit on those courses.
I think I can add to that, Rob. I think it sounds facetious, but the University of YouTube can teach you a hell of a lot of actual practical skills that will be used on the job, and then follow that up with kind of the big one at the moment is AWS certification. For those that don't know it, it's like Amazon Web Services. So these are very, very short courses. You do all your prep work with YouTube and medium websites, and honestly you can learn that, and then you will get incredibly valuable skills that you'll be immediately picked up in the market.
Yeah, and things like Open University as well. I mean, there's lots of great training out there that doesn't have to be formal, lengthy, expensive. The only thing I would add is use your network. Your network is your biggest resource for when you want to try something different.
And volunteering.
Say that again, Kelly?
Volunteering.
Yeah.
Areas that you like as well.
Yeah. And it's important to know you don't have to change jobs to volunteer. I went from bucketing mud from place to place in my first job to running the R&D section of a publicly listed company within the same company within 3 years, based on constantly volunteering to do the tasks that nobody else was doing just so that I could learn. And the job leads the title, leads the pay. So Dushanthi has asked, I wish to get some understanding of the chemical regulatory area as being an auditor for a while in quality and safety. I wish to pass my contact details to you and talk later. Oh, there we go. So one to follow up on Marie. We'll make that introduction, Dushanthi. Dushanthi, I'll also point out that 3 of the mentors in the mentoring program this year work in the regulatory space. So there's multiple opportunities to build your network in that space if you're interested. And Anne-Marie has asked, Rob, as someone who's worked in science communication, are most of the roles on the front lines in front of camera / writing articles, or are there a lot of behind the scenes jobs as well? Bloody good question. How do I get on it?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit, my experience may not be the experience you'd have now. There's much less broadcasting opportunity now because so much has gone online. But yes, there's a lot more. I'm one of the foundation members of Australian Science Communicators, and I was the national VP for 6 years. And in that time, we actually created the term science communicator as a recognizable profession. And a lot of industries have found that they need somebody to take their science and communicate it, because it's quite an esoteric field. And that skill of being able to communicate is a really important one. People who can do it well often take it for granted, but then you come up against people who can't do it, and they're lost. So yes, there are increasing numbers of opportunities there. I'd suggest joining Australian Science Communicators and sort of, getting to know the people in that field. There's a lot behind the scenes that happens. I don't know if I'm right in this, but if I were starting again, I would really explore how to do stuff on the internet, how to set up businesses, how to set up sales, how to set up that stuff. We're doing it with Curiosity Show, but that's pretty specialized. We're just putting old material up. Well, we make a quid out of it. But I think if I was starting again, I'd really work out how to run a business on YouTube. And I'm sure there are going to be so many opportunities opening up there for internet development, internet-based professions that we haven't thought of yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's lots of volunteering opportunities, even within RACI. I mean, 2 young members have set up the RACI podcast that you can find on Spotify. And there's always the opportunity to pitch articles and write articles for Chemistry in Australia magazine. I just had my 56th article appear in Chemistry in Australia this month, and I am awfully thrilled with myself.
I think that's how we met, isn't it? I used to do editorials for them, and we met like that.
Exactly how we met, Rob. Now, Salma, you have your hand up. If you have a question to ask, can you pop it into the Q&A? I'm going to ask one last question, unless Salma asks something. I guess the biggest question, what's the highlights of working in your sector? What do you like the most, and what do you dislike about it? Rob, you've spoken most recently, so I'll start with you.
Me or Robert?
Yeah, Rob, yourself. So the highlights, what did you like? What did you dislike?
I really loved I was hired as a journalist by Channel 10 News. I'd never studied journalism, but they needed a scientist who could communicate rather than trying to get a journalist to learn the science. So science took me into areas where I had no right to be. But I really loved I used to do features, one a week. And from academe, where you'd sit on committees and they would still be debating the same thing year after year, because we all know how to prolong issues you don't want resolved. But you'd go in and you'd start at the week, you didn't know what you're going to do. At the end of the week, you had finished something, it was complete, it was a little entity, it had gone to air. It may be ephemeral and you had to start again, but you're always completing little projects. That was a joy to me, little entities that you'd made against a deadline. Writing books was the same. So I really enjoyed having projects I could finish and wrap up, and they existed, which they didn't do before. I love that aspect of it.
Is there anything you disliked?
Yeah, committees. Again, I would be brief, but being a head of department in university, I had so many committees. I was getting ready for one day, and they had an efficiency expert from America came out, and they interviewed him. It was a quick interview. He was efficient. And they said, what's the secret? And he said two things. I won't go to any meeting that's longer than half an hour. He said, I won't even go at all unless you can write down the objectives in one sentence or a short paragraph. And I was lining up all these meetings. I thought, I'm going to cancel them and write a book a year, and I did. So thanks to that unknown specialist. But, plan your time, use your time well, don't waste it.
Outstanding. Nicely said. Kelly, I think it's easy to say what you love about teaching.
Yeah. Look, teaching science is really good. I get to teach more than just chemistry, which I really enjoy. So being able to branch out into those other fields is always exciting. I'm not going to lie, I don't enjoy marking. But I do know that there are a few teachers out there that do, and being able to just provide feedback and help the kids expand can be quite enjoyable for some people. But definitely being in the classroom and being able to help young people explore science and just play with it. Just playing with science is great. And that's what I enjoy most about my job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Robert.
I think the highlight of my career has been, I suppose it's been a realization that's kind of dawned on me. And because I came from science and then went into finance, you think that at first brush, there's kind of there's no link other than some of the maths is kind of similar. It just doesn't feel as if there's any kind of real significant link between the two. And then the more you stay in finance and the more that you understand about how the economy and how macroeconomics runs, you realize actually the economy and macroeconomics is really an echo of technology washes that come through from pure science research and then kind of impact into kind of products and then go into finance. And so when I kind of started realizing, you then kind of identified, whether it was, the kind of 3G boom and mobile communication boom, or whether there's a PC boom, or then it was like kind of web, the kind of web 2.0 boom. And then you also, you get quite good at it, and then you realize what the next boom is going to be. And that's happening at the moment. And that was, you're kind of predicting this and then realizing that, cryptocurrencies and the blockchain is the next big macro boom that's gonna just totally revolutionize everything. And President Obama said, cryptocurrencies like everybody having their own Swiss bank account in their pocket. And when he said that, I was like, exactly. And so you kind of see that this kind of slow moving train washing through what was first, it was like a pure technology research area, some cryptographers. And then it's just kind of washing through every industry that you see, including banking. And when you realize that, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it now. I get what the link is. And I suppose that's the highlight. The low light, yeah, there was some pretty long hours and there's some pretty aggressive people that you have to deal with. But, you know, you go home and smile and be with your family.
Outstanding. Marie, you get the final say.
Oh, thanks, Dave. For me, the highlight is, I've got two. One is being blessed in that I get to ask people why for a living. I'm a scientist. Don't we all love to ask why? I love it. I love it. And in doing so, I get to learn a lot of science through collaborations and things like that. So related to that is I like that I'm able to use my analytical skills in a very broad range of jobs. Believe it or not, law and science are more closely related than particularly lawyers would have you believe in terms of our skill sets. The thing I don't like is the long hours, and especially because I'm finding it, particularly as I get older, like Rob said, you really long for that time with your family, especially as older members get older, and you realise that you need to spend time with them as well as your younger members of your family. So I don't really like the long hours, and sometimes I get annoyed when I talk with people who are very difficult to deal with, but I am learning to deal with that myself. So, and like Robert said, you go home to your family.
Well, the beauty of the current situation, we're mostly already home with our families. Look, that's excellent. Thank you, everybody. I think you've done wonderfully tonight. I will read our closing spiel. I apologise that we've gone a little bit long. So tonight has been another event as part of the RACI Careers Development Program. Through webinars, networking events, mentoring lectures and workshops, the RACI Careers Development Program aims to help graduating students and early career scientists get the best possible start in their careers. Our upcoming careers events include the Intensive Careers Short Course and Workshop. That workshop is next weekend. It's for active job seekers, so anybody who's actively looking for work, or if you know anyone who's actively looking for work. Most of our people who do the workshop find a job within 4 weeks of the workshop. It works. Next week, RACI in Queensland, the ECCG, is doing an interview skills workshop, which would be great. And of course, 2 weeks from now, camaraderie, online networking. The recording of this event will be uploaded to RACI Careers Development YouTube channel over the next few days, as well as to our career site at raci.org.au. I'll also include links to the 100 Reactions Project, to the Curiosity Show, and if I can find Rob's TED Talk, I'll link to that as well. In the meantime, our thanks to Rob, to Robert, to Marie, and to, good God, I'm sorry, to Callie. I went to say Clarissa, and I knew that wasn't right. So sorry. To Callie, thank you very much to everybody for your participation tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Turn bright red.
Oh, thank you. It's all right. Can I just say, Rob, I've shown a Curiosity Show in my classroom this week, and they loved it.
Oh, good on you. Good on you.
Outstanding. Callie, I've got to ask.